Welcome to the How to Play Battletech Advanced Tactics Series, Commander. This video is intended to be a definitive guide about heat management in Classic Battletech. In order to bring you the best information available on YouTube, I interviewed players who consistently find success in online global tournaments and incorporated their strategies and tactics into this guide. If you're one of the few who make it to the end of this video, you'll be well on your way to mastering Classic Battletech. Let's get started. Okay, let's talk about heat management and what you need to know in order to be successful in Classic Battletech. So there's not a whole lot from what I've seen on the internet about heat management, and we're going to dive into exactly what that means when people say manage your heat, okay? We're going to start with a high-level overview of high-level concepts and then dive into very specific examples so that you can apply it to any mech and be successful, all right? So high-level overview. All actions in Battletech take heat. So, whether you're shooting, moving, all those actions take heat. There's sort of we play with time when you manage your heat, right? So you get damage now, you get damage up front, and then you're kind of paying later with accuracy and movement penalties if you push that heat high. If you go too high, you may shut down or explode. And then you have these built-in heat sinks where you're losing heat every turn. So kind of like a mana or energy kind of mechanic in Battletech that's similar to like League of Legends or World of Warcraft kind of thing. All right, so high-level concept, you want to think of heat like an overdrive bar. Under normal circumstances, you're managing that heat and you're steadily gaining small amounts of heat to push out like basically consistent damage. We're going to be getting into that as we go through this presentation. When the opportunity is very good or we get very good percentages to hit, we're going to push our heat, okay? We're going to take advantage of that situation. Another situation where we're going to push our heat is if there's basically no way out or we have our backs up against the wall, we're going to die. We may as well push our heat and try to fight our way out of the situation. So we're pushing our heat to take advantage of opportunity. We're going to be cooling down when we have bad percentages to hit. So we're going to manage our heat, cool down when the percentages to hit are bad or the opportunities are bad, or we're maneuvering in or positioning for a better position so we can push our heat, right, to prep for a future attack. All right. We're also going to cool down when after we push our heat, right, we can't keep pushing it. We gotta reset back to zero or somewhere thereabouts. All right, so now that we have that high-level concept out of the way, what heat is a good heat number to push to? How do we seize opportunity with balancing the present, with the later that we're going to have to pay for? And what number is good to push to without risking destruction? So let's go over the key heat thresholds. This is basically the heat chart with the target numbers changed to percentages so it's easier to see. So I think if you're playing for damage, if you're thinking about maximizing your damage, you should think about this +1 modifier to hit. You generally want to play under the numbers 7, 12, and 16, so you avoid these modifiers to fire. I think these are generally pretty safe numbers to play under. Movement point penalties kind of matter, but they also kind of don't because, well, usually your mech has a decent amount of movement. Kind of matters, I guess, in the later stage of the game when ranges kind of close. It could cramp your style here. But generally, I don't really think about it too much. -1 movement is not that big a deal. Likewise, the shutdown chance of 8.3%, really not that bad. The number, the target number might look a little scary when you're first looking at it, but when you break it down, 8.3% is not a very likely event, pretty unlikely. The next set of heat thresholds we want to think about is 18 to 21. So if you hit 18, you have this unlikely event, this 28% chance of shutting down, which is kind of risky. Shutting down is really not good. You pretty much lose a whole turn and you're going to get slammed by a lot of damage. So if you really need to gamble, you can gamble up to 18 and all the way up to this 21. Odds are a bit worse than 50-50 at 22 heat. So if you really want to, you can push up into 22 to 25 heat range. And I really would not recommend pushing past pushing into 26. Once you hit 26, it's pretty likely 83% chance that you're going to explode unless there's really no way out, okay? And these ammunition explosion chances, again, 8.3%, really not that likely for you to explode. Again, here you're starting to stack these modifiers, so you're rolling kind of twice here. This gets a little iffy, but really don't be pushing past 25 unless there's really no way out, okay? So now that we know these key threshold numbers, these key numbers to think about, how do we go about managing this over time? So the tactic I want to teach you here, I want you to think in net heat. I want you to think in the total amount of heat gained in a single turn. So net 0 heat. So if we are sinking 10 heat a turn and we're gaining 10 heat a turn, that's a net heat of 0, right? We can sustain this combination indefinitely, right? If it will constantly be at 0 heat, a heat bar will never move. Net 2 heat, meaning we gain a total of 2 heat a turn, is a nice number. It's pretty easy to sustain. So we basically, on turn 1, we go 2, and then 4, and then 6, and then once we're at 6, we think about pushing into this 8 to get that +1 modifier to fire, or if we want to kind of reset and cool down. Net 3 is a little harder to sustain, so you go from 0 to 3 to 6, and then you think about this going to 9, which will get you this +1 modifier to fire. And we can also think about alternating, so we can go +4, either +4 to +7, so we can go from 0 to 7, and then reset, and then 7, and then reset. Same thing if we go like +5 or something, we go 0 to 5, then back to 0, 5 to 0, 5 to 0. That's another kind of combination. Okay. And we can manage our heat. We can fine tune our heat by deciding when to use medium lasers and SRMs. I'll get into that a little bit later. Okay, so now that we have the net heat concept out of the way, we're going to start diving in deeper. We're going to start thinking about combinations. And what you want to do this, before the game starts, okay? And this will really help you kind of unlock the mech, or kind of understand how the mech is supposed to fight, what the optimal way to fight is. So I really would recommend taking maybe like 5 minutes or a couple minutes, just look at the sheet and figure out what kind of combinations you can do, right? So you want to look at the sheet and come up with basically the combinations of movement and weapons that are going to help you accomplish specific tasks that have a manageable net heat, right? So you're going to look at like, okay, what gives me a net heat of 2? What gives me a net heat of 3? What keeps me neutral? How can I push my heat? How far can I push my heat? Things like that, okay? So the combinations you want to come up with are like kind of a movement combination that's going to keep you relatively cold, right? Because you're going to be inaccurate as you're moving with your weapon shot, with your shots. So kind of like a cool or a neutral heat movement combination. You want to come up with a sustained damage combination. So what gives you a net heat of 2 or 3? How far you can push your heat. So what combinations are going to let you push heat? What combination of weapons are going to let you cool down without sinking too much heat? Do you have a piercing attack? And then do you have a critical hit kind of combination? So these are the common combinations that you kind of want to think about, okay? And we're going to go through a combinations example here by looking at the Warhammer 6R, looking at a very specific example of Warhammer 6R, and seeing how we will manage heat with that. Okay, so we can see the Warhammer 6R, we have a couple of combinations here. We have a movement combination that gives us a net heat of 0, right? So we're inaccurate when we're moving, so we want to keep our heat relatively stable. So 0, if we are not in PPC range, if we're not in medium laser range, meaning when the game just starts, we're going to start sinking -6 heat, which is not great, but it is what it is. We don't want to sink too much heat. It's too much negative heat. But yeah, we also have a sustained damage combination with the piercing, right? So we open it with piercing attacks, 2 PPCs, and then we have a critting combination where we're firing 1 PPC and our SRM6 with a couple medium lasers. That's also a sustained damage combination. We also have a pushing heat combination. So if we see an opportunity, we want to push heat, we can fire all our brawl weapons plus our PPCs for net 12. So let's play out those turns here. In the early game, everything's going to be at long range, and you're going to be running into position, so the accuracy is going to be very low. So the simulated accuracy here is 8%. We're going to be moving, right? So we're going to keep our heat at 0. We're going to keep low because the chance to hit is low. So we're probably firing 1 PPC and running is what's happening. We probably are not going to get our medium lasers into play at this stage. So the heat's going to be like -6, but we can't go below 0 heat, so it's going to be at 0. Then once we're in position, we're going to start with our piercing attack. So still pretty low percentage, 17%, but we're just firing our PPC, see if we can land anything. As the enemy closes, right, we're continuing to sustain damage with our PPCs, right? We're managing our heat. It's 2 to 4, right? We're not doing anything crazy. And then here in the simulation, the target moves. It makes a mistake, right? Maybe we catch them out in the open, or they have to cross through a very dangerous area where they don't have cover. So they're giving us 83% chance. In that case, we want to push our heat, right? We're going to fire everything to maximize our damage here. So we spike it to 16. And then on the following turn, we're going to have to manage our heat. So turn 5, they return back to being very evasive. So we cool down by firing just one medium laser. We sink 18. We gain, we sink 18 heat. We gain 3 heat for net negative 15. So we go from 16 to 1. And then the next thing we want to do is once our target is opened up, right, we're saying, okay, these weapons probably opened them up. Then we want to swap over to our critting combination for a net 2. And so that's how we manage our heat, right? Okay, so one question you might have is it better to sustain damage over time, right? Is it better to have that slow heat up, that net +2? Or is it better to spike my heat on one turn and then cool back down on another turn? Like, what's better? What does more damage? And if you ask me, my opinion is it's better to do sustained damage, net 2, slowly over time, under normal conditions, right? If you're getting an average number to hit, because you're going to remain a threat, right? If you spike your heat all the way up to 12, let's say, your opponent's going to know that you have to cool down on the next turn, or if you push your heat again, you're going to be at, like, really high to hit, and you don't really have anywhere to go, right? You aren't really a threat once you're at 20 something heat, right? You have to kind of cool down. And then you might be doing higher than average damage here. So I did this scenario here just on the Warhammer, just to see kind of like under normal conditions, like if you have 7s to hit, which is pretty average, right? You're at like medium range, the target's in cover. If you slowly sustain your damage, you do seem to get higher expected damage here versus the spiked damage. So if you're firing everything, under the spike scenario, you're firing 2 PPCs, two medium lasers, and SRM6, and then you kind of swap over to cooling down with 2 medium lasers. Once you're at 12 heat, you're taking this negative to hit. But yeah, seems to be that you do a little bit more slowly sustained damage, and you also remain a threat. Again, this is not conclusive. It might be that under certain mechs and under certain conditions you do want to do the spike thing, but at least on this rough kind of look at things, it does seem that sustained damage is better under normal conditions. So yeah, I would say only push your heat when you're given like really good numbers to hit. So if you catch your opponent out or they make a mistake, is the time to push your heat. Under normal conditions, though, if you're normally fighting, just try and do a sustained damage combination. Okay, another concept here as you're thinking about what combinations give you what, is you can kind of tune your heat on the fly by managing, by electing how many medium lasers and SRMs you use. So if you need to like get to a specific heat number or play under those target numbers, right, that 7 and 11 heat, stuff like that, you can just choose how many medium lasers or SRMs you activate to kind of key into the that target heat number you want to get. It's a lot better to have, from a design standpoint, a couple of these medium lasers and SRMs, because it helps you tune the heat, right? So if you have a very heat-intensive weapon like a PPC or a large laser, those spike your heat quite a bit. So having the medium lasers definitely helps you. Having like 1 or 2 of them definitely helps you manage that. Okay. Another tactic you want to do is you want to avoid sinking negative heat or too much negative heat, right? So it's very bad from an efficiency standpoint because you can't drop below 0. Very bad for you to sink negative heat for long periods of time. Basically because the heat sinks you paid for are not being utilized. So if you have 10 heat sinks, right, and you're only generating 5 heat, those other 5 heat sinks are not being utilized. That's very bad. You're wasting potential. Sometimes you need to sink negative heat, like in the early turns when you're positioning, but you want to avoid the negative heat as much as possible, I would say, right? And so we can see this as a design. Some mechs are designed in a way that's very bad, where they can't push their heat, right? So here we have an example, the Shadowhawk, our favorite whipping boy on this channel. It's a disadvantage. You can't push your heat because you're unable to take advantage of opportunity. So I'm going to show you here. This is the Shadowhawk's weapons loadout. It's their heat sinks, and these are the kind of net heat values that we can get. Makes it very clear that the Shadowhawk's a very inefficient design, and it can't take advantage of opportunities, right? So if you shoot everything, all these weapons, and you jump, you get -1 heat. So you're basically wasting 1 heat sink. One of these heat sinks is sitting dead, right? Even if you try and max your damage, you fire everything and you stay still to max your accuracy, you still sink -4 heat. So, 4 of these heat sinks are sitting dead. So this is not great. Not only do you have dead heat sinks, but even if you get in a position where, you have an 80 or 90% chance to hit, and you will note on this guy, like, there's no way to push heat, like unlike the Warhammer, right? Where the Warhammer can fire a whole bunch of weapons to take advantage of that. You're always stuck at this flat damage. So not a great design. Okay, so another tactic that I'd like to go over, and this will help you manage your heat properly and help you maximize your damage, is going for early heat reset. Okay, so under this concept, you're gonna judge the rate your enemy is closing. Okay, and if you expect your enemy to enter the next range bracket, you're gonna reset your heat early. Okay, and that's gonna raise your opportunity for future damage. So for example, if I have an opponent at long range, I'm firing at the 17 to 28% accuracy, and I expect him to move into medium range. Well, on the turn before I expect him to move into the next accuracy bracket, I want to reset my heat back to 0 because that will make sure that I have a clear heat bar, and then on those following turns, I can fire at 42 to 72%. Accuracy rate rather than the 17 to 28, right? And the same thing goes for when the target is moving from medium to short. Okay, so to explain that a little bit better, let's take a look at the Archer here. It's got 2 LRM-20s and a couple of medium lasers for backup. It's got 10 heat sinks. Okay, so we can look at the Archer's weapons here. Here's the Archer down below. Here's our little target. Here's the Centurion. We have a movement combination, right, to like position in. We have a static LRM combination, right? This is just very steady damage, net 2 heat. We fire 2 LRM-20s from a static position once we're set up and slowly heat up. We also have a close range combo here. And then if the enemy messes up, we can open up with a +8 to push our heat. And then if we need a cooldown or we need to reset our heat, we can just fire 1 LRM-20 from -4. So let's take a look at how that will play out, okay? So turn 1, we're getting position, right? We're probably running into cover, running to an elevated position. Accuracy rate's going to be very, very low, so it's 8%. We basically just do this. We sink -2 heat here. We can't go below 0, so it's not great, but, you know, that's kind of how the early turns work out. Once we're in position, we start bombing him. The target's still at long range, right? Long range for LRMs. We start firing. We get net 2 heat. We keep our heat steady, and we get 28%. So next turn, turn 3, target gets a little closer. We continue on with our static LRM barrage at 28%. Turn 4, he's right here. He's just right at the edge. So we elect to reset our heat early, right? We do this -4 cooldown. We fire 1 LRM-20. We get our heat back to 0. And that enables the future turns to go to shoot more accurately, right? So we're at the 58% accuracy rate, and we go 2, 4, 6. Rather than if we didn't reset our heat early here, we'd be at 6, and then we'd be at 8, 10, and 12, and we'd be taking negative modifiers to hit in these later stages, okay? So more of the story is basically, yeah, just reset your heat when you think that the enemy is going to cross over into the next range bracket to maximize your damage. Okay, and then just like there's design disadvantages, there's also design advantages. We can go over a couple of those right now. So not having ammunition, so being in an all-energy build, is a design advantage. Things like the Black Knight and Crab have all lasers. And what that does is that effectively gets rid of the ammunition explosion chance on the heat table, right? So, I mean, all energy builds don't need to worry about ammo explosions. Another design advantage is not having to move. So kind of artillery mechs like the awesome Archer and Longbow, they don't really need to move. So the most they'll need to do is kind of turn themselves, maybe to get the enemy in their range, but that's not going to cost a lot of movement at all. So effectively, these guys can pretty much ignore the movement modifiers, right? So their accuracy or their heat chart kind of looks like this. So very interesting design advantages to keep in mind with the energy and the artillery builds. Okay, all right, that's it for this episode. I will see you in the next one. Make sure to go to the Discord for lecture notes. All right, bye-bye. Yeah, we ran out of patience for your love with the